Have you ever found yourself banging your head against the table after 2 hours of debugging and you just can't find your darn bug? And it only took you 30 minutes to write the code in the first place? That's a great time to just say, wait a minute, what am I doing here? Let's just start over from scratch. Now, the problem with rewriting from scratch is you get new opportunities to add superfluous complexity, to make the thing a big mess. So I kind of recommend maintaining rather than rewriting when you can. Here's why. When you maintain code, what's going to happen is it's kind of like a rock rolling down a hill. Every time there's a corner sticking out, that corner is going to bash. It's basically going to cause problems for you. And it's going to bash against the ground, and that corner will get broken off. The more you maintain code, the more what tends to happen is things that belong in the tube class end up in the tube class. And things that don't make sense there cause you problems until you rip them out. And so you can kind of tell when your code is ugly because it's a pain to maintain. And you can tell when your code is clean because it's easy to maintain. And so the more you maintain it, the more it kind of forces you to write good, clean code. Anyway, I'm bashing this analogy to death. But the point of it all is, you should be able to move stuff around and shift stuff around and fix just a few compiler errors, and it shouldn't cost you hours and hours of time. And if it does, guess what? Your code's too complex. You're not writing it in a nice, clean, modularized form. The main point of assignment 4 is really to make your code nicer and cleaner. There's not a whole lot more you have to do. There is the add the Goombas and the fireballs. But once you get polymorphism working, that's super easy to add because you've already got tubes. And adding 2 more sprites is going to be so simple. You just make a class that extends sprite, add some instances, and they should just work, assuming you've done everything else right. So let's make sure you get polymorphism really well, and let me clean up my code. So here's what we're doing. Notice most of the instructions are implement polymorphism, all the way up to here. Step 5, ponder the elegance of how you've improved your code. You can tell I was in a philosophical mood when I wrote these instructions. This step, add a Goomba, is going to be a piece of cake because you'll just add a class that extends sprite. He'll have an XY position, and you'll have to write an update method. How hard is it to write code that walks back and forth? Should be really easy. Boolean value that says which way you're going, and you either increment or decrement his position. That's pretty simple. Yeah, you don't need to even animate him. If he just slides back and forth, I'm fine with that. I don't care. We've already covered animation. If you want to animate him and draw special frames with his feet actually moving, go ahead, knock yourself out. But we're moving on to newer stuff. And we'll add fireballs, and then we'll make the Goomba go up in flames because we're sadistic and it's funny. And there's the assignment. Okay? So let's see what I've done to my code now. This looks like I'm doing a lot of work to fix all these compiler errors, though. But truthfully, it kind of makes me feel good because I know I'm making my code cleaner. And the more you churn your code, the more your code becomes clean. Okay, 164, error cannot find symbol. S dot is inside. Notice the caret is pointing to the period. So apparently Java doesn't know what a period is, right? No. Java knows what the period means. That caret isn't pointing in the right place. It actually says right here, symbol, method is inside. The thing it doesn't know about is inside. Did you catch that? Okay, so why doesn't it know about is inside? Because I'm using a sprite to say is it is inside. And if we look up here, is inside, I only have an isInside method in my tube class. Okay, now we think to ourselves, would it make sense for any sprite to be able to answer the question, is this mouse XY inside of it? Totally would, right? I mean, every thing is going to know its X and Y and width and height. So I say, let's just take this method and move it into our sprite class. Now notice I've got an abstract method and a regular method inside of this abstract class. That's perfectly fine. You can do that. Now every class I make, or every sprite that I make, every class that extends sprite, will automatically have an isInside method, and I'll never need to write that again. I've written it once, and voila, all of my sprites have an isInside method. Now this isn't going to compile because I need to have an int w and an int height. And let's see, w equals 60 and height equals 95. Notice now I'm having to initialize in my constructor instead of inline like that. Because I do. Because this variable is going to be initialized differently than the way the tube is going to initialize it. Does that make sense? Okay. Well, my tube better do the same thing. W equals 55, height equals 400. Now I can get rid of that. Yay, my code is getting cleaner. This is so exciting. Tubes have done it. Goombas do it. Goombas didn't do it. I better make a Goomba constructor. Where should Goombas start? I don't know. How about we tell it in the constructor? We'll say x equals xx, y equals yy, w equals... Anybody know the width of Goombas by chance? I'll look it up really fast. Goomba. I spelled it wrong. Okay, 99 by 118. Okay. 99, height equals 118. There we go. I build again. Do you know why I hit enter a whole bunch of times before I build my code? So I can find the top really easily, right? What I really should do, in fact, just because I should teach you good practices, I should come up here and edit my build script. To do that, I could just use a loop. That would probably be even better, more programmatic. But now if I build, it skips a whole bunch of lines, and now I can always find the top. Okay, view.java line 51, incompatible type, sprite cannot be converted to a tube. What does this mean? What's my problem? I'm saying tube T, but model.tubes is in fact a list of sprites because I said so. One thing I really hope you will not do is end up having in your game a list of sprites named tubes. If anybody does that, I'm going to be a little bit grumpy because you know what, for crying out loud, it's not tubes anymore, right? That was the variable name for tubes. You really should go back and say, let's call it sprites. And you'll find that yes, this makes no difference to the computer, but at least it makes me feel better when it's called sprites instead of tubes. Okay, so I've got a sprite. I'm going to say sprite s equals that. And now I've got this draw image thing here. I've got a slight little problem because remember my Mario XY position is his toe, and the tube's XY position is the back of his head, right? His crown. So am I going to draw at the sprite's XY position, or am I going to draw at the sprite's toe position? What do I do? Well, bad solution is I say if s is, what's the method called? Is type? Is type of? Ooh, I think that one. If instance of, that's what I was looking for. If s is instance of Mario. Okay, anyway, it's not coming to me how to do that right now, but that's okay. That's the wrong way to do it anyway. Let me show you a better way to do it. I'm going to pass the buck. I'm going to say, hey, each sprite, draw thyself. How about that? Does that make sense? Because if I do that, then the Mario can draw himself from his toe, and the tube can draw itself from the crown, and everything will just work nicely. I'll have to pass this graphics object to it so that it can draw itself, because it's going to need that. And I'm going to need to take this out of here, and I'm going to come back to my model. By the way, don't say thyself. That was me trying to be funny. And void draw thyself graphics G. And now these, oh wait, I don't need a body because that's going to be abstract. Now, because I made this abstract, every class is going to have to implement a draw thyself method, and so Mario will have a draw thyself method that will draw itself in the right place, and Goomba will have a draw thyself method that will draw itself in the right place. And long story short, I'm using polymorphism right here. Every sprite gets to draw itself, every sprite knows how to update itself, and look what's happening to my view class. Suddenly my view class doesn't know anything about Marios or Goombas or sprites. All it knows, or tubes. All it knows about are sprites. And thus my view class becomes very, very, very simple. My model doesn't need to know anything about Marios or Goombas or tubes. All it needs to know about are sprites. And it can say, my job is to have a big list of sprites and to tell them all to update themselves. And now your code's starting to have order and organization, even though there's different types all interacting and working together. Can you see why this is cool? Okay, yes.
If we draw the tubes relative to Mario's position.
Yeah, so that's a bit of an issue. We've got sprites that are going to need to know, I'll put it this way, tubes, in order to draw themselves, let's do that. Void draw thyself graphics G. Now remember when we did the lazy loading thing? So we've got a buffered image. In fact, everything needs a buffered image that's a sprite. So we should stick that inside of our sprite class, right? Buffered image, current image. Now I'm going to use this current image here, and yet, now Mario's going to have 5 different images, right? So Mario's probably going to have to load 5 buffered images here, and yet there's always one of them that's the current image. So we can have this be a redundant pointer that points to the one of the 5 images that is his current image, if we want it to. That's one way to do it. Or we could just not put images in the sprite and make each class load their own images, and then when you call draw thyself, it knows which one to pick. I don't know what's a good design. I'm going to let you guys have artistic freedom on this one. Do what you want there, okay? Yeah. Yeah, so I put all of my classes in one big file because I'm doing an in-class demo, and it's a lot faster for me to scroll up and down than to have to switch between files. You should probably put all your classes in their own files with their own name. I think so. I didn't quite finish answering the previous question, which is how's the sprite going to know where the scroll position is so that it can draw itself? Did I answer your question? Okay, good. So basically, when we get to here, we've got to know the scroll position, right? How are we going to do it? Can we pass it as a parameter?
Yes.
Usually we could. However, if we do that, I think I've made so many changes, my code's nowhere near compiling right now, and I don't think I want to compile it. So I'll just take my word for it. If I tried this, it wouldn't compile. Here's why. It would tell me, you don't have a draw thyself method. And then I would come down here and I would say, yes, I do. It's right there. What's the problem? Yeah, this one doesn't have the same signature as the abstract one. In other words, this method doesn't satisfy the contract. And the reason that's no good is because the view here, which is going to call draw thyself, is only passing a G, and it doesn't know to pass that extra parameter. So there's a little bit of an issue. You can't really use parameters when you're doing abstract polymorphism. Therefore, we're going to have to, just because there's no other solution, have something in here that allows the tube to get the information we want. What if we say model, and then maybe whenever you make a tube, you have to tell it about the model. Is that reasonable? Let's call that M, so that now I can say here model equals M. Now, every single tube knows about the model, and therefore in the draw thyself I can say int scroll position is equal to model dot Mario dot X. Something like that. That's one way to do it. Is that the best way to do it? I don't know. Here's where it comes down to, if you understand the principles of what you can and can't do, then now you're free to go architect your code however you want. And, well, there's a solution, so use that one unless you have a better one. You could make a static, you could make the global model. Yeah. You could make a global model. You could use a static member variable for the model, and then everything could access the model from everywhere. If you want to do that, go ahead, but just fair warning, in a future assignment, we're going to have multiple models, and then that'll make a great big mess of your code. So if you keep their, basically this is a better solution than that one. And I think I've now answered that question. Is that fair? Okay. So yeah, my sprites are going to need a reference to the model, and that enables them to get at everything, because the model basically has everything, right? The model knows the whole list of the sprites. Now, this is about what your model class should have in it when you're done. I have two things. I have an array list of sprites, and I have a Mario object. Do you see how that's everything I need? Now, in fact, Mario is a sprite, isn't it? So I could even get rid of that variable if I wanted to. I'm going to leave it, but I am going to make Mario extend sprite, and here's why I'm going to do it that way. I'm not going to actually have Mario, let me put it this way. I am still going to put Mario in this list of sprites, and I'm going to have Mario be drawn just like the tubes and the Goombas, the same way everything else does. The only reason I have this is as a redundant pointer. So this Mario is not the Mario. The Mario is in this list of sprites, but this one I will use just so that when I do on-click, or when I press a key or something like that, I can get it really quickly. It would be kind of a pain in the controller if right here I said model.Mario and I didn't have a Mario. I had to iterate through all the sprites to find the one that's Mario just so I could move him. See why that's kind of a big pain? So it makes a lot of sense to have your model have an extra redundant pointer to Mario, even though Mario will also be in your list of sprites there. Okay. I think I'm going to stop here because I've covered a lot of stuff. But I want to ask, how is polymorphism clicking for you? Does it make sense? Do you feel like you can operate in this domain? Okay. Well, it's a big concept, so I've devoted an entire assignment just to using polymorphism. It'll cause you to rewrite all your code, which is a good thing. Your code will get all clean. And afterwards, you'll have a game that's really easy to add stuff to. You'll be able to add new things to it without a whole lot of work, and hopefully everything's now modular. So I think that's a good thing.